Darwin Hayes, a 30-year-old billionaire, is the head of Hayes Industries, a multinational corporation based in the sprawling metropolis of Avalon City. His life is a whirlwind of board meetings, exclusive events, and high-stakes business deals. Despite his success, Darwin feels a growing emptiness. He's surrounded by people, yet all of them seem driven by his wealth and status. He longs for something real, something genuine that he hasn't found in his carefully curated world. One evening, exhausted from yet another day of dealing with corporate politics, Darwin decides to escape the suffocating confines of his elite circle. Dressed in simple clothes to avoid attention, he takes a long walk through the city. The weather, matching his mood, turns stormy. As rain begins to pour, he finds himself in a part of town he rarely visits, a forgotten area near the city's outskirts, filled with rundown buildings and alleyways. It's there, in the dim light of a street lamp, that Darwin spots her. Huddled against the side of a closed bakery is a young woman, barely shielded from the rain. Her clothes are tattered, and her hands shake from the cold. But her face, the determined set of her jaw and the defiant glint in her green eyes, stops him in his tracks. Her name is Wendy Rivers, and though she appears to be down on her luck, there is a strength in her that Darwin immediately senses. She glances up as he approaches, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. "Do you need help?" Darwin asks, feeling the sting of how inadequate his words sound. Wendy shakes her head, pulling her jacket tighter around her thin frame. "I'm fine," she mutters, clearly unwilling to engage with him. Darwin, unused to being brushed off, is intrigued. He can't walk away, not yet. "I know you don't want help," he says, crouching down to her level. "But how about a meal? No strings attached." Wendy hesitates. She's been homeless for months after losing her job and falling through the cracks of the system. Accepting help from strangers usually comes with hidden costs. But something about this man, his gentle tone, his persistence, makes her curious. After a long pause, she finally nods. They walk together through the rain to a small, cozy cafe a few blocks away, the kind of place where nobody would expect to see a billionaire. Inside the cafe, the warmth contrasts with the cold outside. Wendy slowly relaxes as she sips hot coffee, though her defenses remain firmly in place. Darwin notices how she eyes the menu cautiously, ordering only a small sandwich despite her obvious hunger. He orders more food, silently encouraging her to eat, but doesn't push her to speak. Over the course of the meal, Wendy reluctantly shares bits and pieces of her story. She had once been a graduate with dreams of working in publishing, but life had taken a turn she hadn't expected. A bad breakup, followed by a job loss, and then mounting debts had left her with nothing. Now she lived day to day, scraping by and trying to survive on the streets. Darwin listens intently, shocked by how easily someone's life could spiral out of control. Wendy's story reminds him of how fragile success can be. Despite everything she's gone through, there's a fire in her that impresses him, a refusal to give in to despair. Wendy, in turn, is surprised by how much Darwin listens without judgment. She had expected condescension or pity, but instead, he seems genuinely interested in her story. She has no idea who he is. His casual clothes and unassuming demeanor give no clue to his wealth. To her, he's just a stranger who, for reasons she can't fathom, seems to care. As the cafe grows quiet and the rain continues to fall outside, Darwin makes her an offer that surprises even himself. "I want to help you, Wendy. I have resources. I can get you off the streets, give you a place to stay for now." Wendy tenses immediately. "I don't need charity," she snaps, pushing back her chair. The sudden flare of pride and anger in her eyes startles Darwin, but he understands. He quickly raises his hands in surrender. "It's not charity," he says gently. "It's a chance to get back on your feet. You don't owe me anything." Wendy stares at him, torn. She doesn't want to depend on anyone, but she's also realistic enough to know she can't survive much longer like this. After what feels like an eternity, she nods, her voice barely a whisper. "Okay." The next morning, Wendy wakes up in the softest bed she's slept in for months. inside a plush room in one of the city's most discreet hotels. She looks around, half expecting it to be a dream, but the view of Avalon City's skyline from the large windows confirms it's real. She feels a rush of gratitude and guilt. She didn't want to feel indebted to Darwin, but here she was, living in luxury while still grappling with her pride. Darwin arrives later that day, checking on her with the same quiet kindness he'd shown the night before. He brings her a few essentials: clothes, toiletries, and a phone in case she needs to contact him. Wendy is overwhelmed but thankful, although she still keeps her guard up. As they sit by the window, sipping coffee, Darwin shares a little more about himself, though he carefully avoids revealing the full extent of his wealth. He tells her he runs a company, but leaves out the fact that it's one of the largest corporations in the country. Instead, they talk about more personal things: their shared love of books, Darwin's passion for architecture, and Wendy's dream of writing a novel. For the first time in a long while, Wendy feels seen. Darwin's sincerity breaks through the walls she spent months building. She begins to trust him, though she remains cautious, unsure of his true intentions. Meanwhile, Darwin finds himself drawn to her even more, not out of pity but out of genuine admiration for her resilience. But their connection doesn't go unnoticed. Word begins to spread about Darwin's unusual behavior. His closest friends and business associates are puzzled by his sudden interest in helping a homeless woman. As rumors circulate through his elite social circles, whispers of ridicule and judgment grow louder. Have you heard? Darwin Hayes is taking in some street urchin. Probably feels sorry for her. One business rival sneers at a charity event. She's probably after his money. Others, too, are quick to mock him. In a world where appearances are everything, Darwin's decision to associate with someone like Wendy is seen as reckless, foolish even. His business partner, Elliot Sterling, approaches him with concern. Darwin, people are talking. This woman, she's bad for your image, Elliot warns over a drink at their private club. You can't afford to look weak or naive. What are you really doing with her? But Darwin, unfazed, brushes off their concerns. He knows what he's doing, even if no one else understands. His feelings for Wendy are complicated, but they are real, and he's not about to let the opinions of others dictate his actions. Wendy, however, remains unaware of the storm brewing around her. As their friendship deepens, Darwin begins to wonder if this connection could turn into something more. But with the world against them and Wendy still grappling with her own fears of inadequacy, Darwin knows that their relationship, whatever it may become, won't be easy. Little does he know that this is only the beginning of a journey that will test not only his resolve, but also Wendy's strength in ways neither of them could have ever anticipated. The next few weeks pass in a blur for Wendy as she begins to acclimate to her new life. Darwin continues to help her without pushing, giving her space to regain her sense of independence. He arranges for her to stay in a modest apartment, far from the luxurious hotels of Avalon City, but comfortable and safe enough for Wendy to feel at ease. She slowly finds her footing again, exploring the possibility of pursuing her writing, getting in touch with local job agencies, and regaining her sense of control over her life. Despite the whirlwind of change, Wendy finds herself thinking about Darwin more than she expected. He visits her frequently, always respectful of her space, but their conversations grow deeper each time. They talk about books, art, and their differing life experiences. The more she learns about Darwin, the more she realizes how lonely his life has been despite his immense success. Darwin, for his part, is captivated by Wendy's determination and vulnerability. There's something magnetic about her spirit, her refusal to let life beat her down, even after everything she's been through. He hasn't told her the full extent of his wealth yet, fearing it might create a chasm between them. Instead, he lets her believe he's just an ordinary businessman. But the two worlds they belong to, Wendy's gritty reality and Darwin's world of opulence, are becoming harder to keep separate. As Wendy begins applying for jobs, she faces the harsh truth of her situation. Even with a new address, her time on the streets has left her with gaps in her resume, and employers are reluctant to give her a chance. She feels the sting of rejection more keenly than ever, and doubts start to creep in. Could she ever truly escape her past? One day, as Wendy walks through Avalon City's busy streets after yet another failed interview, she notices people staring at her. Whispers follow her wherever she goes, and before long, she discovers why. A tabloid headline catches her eye: billionaire Darwin Hayes and his mystery woman. Is she a gold digger? Her heart drops. Wendy rushes to a newsstand and grabs the magazine, her hands shaking. The article is filled with baseless speculation about her relationship with Darwin. It paints her as a schemer, a woman looking to take advantage of a wealthy man. She stares at the photos printed across the pages, taken without her knowledge. There's a picture of her and Darwin at the cafe, another of them walking together down the street. Each image is framed to suggest intimacy, even though their relationship is still undefined. Humiliation washes over her. She knows people can be cruel, but seeing it in print feels like a punch to the gut. What will Darwin think? Has he seen this? Is this how he sees her now, too? Panicked, Wendy tries to call Darwin, but he doesn't answer. She assumes the worst, that he's avoiding her, that the gossip has made him rethink helping her. Meanwhile, Darwin is dealing with the fallout in his own way. The article spreads quickly, igniting conversations across social media and among his business associates. His inbox floods with concerned emails, warning him about the risks of associating with someone like Wendy. At the office, even his closest colleagues question his judgment. They can't understand why he's risking his reputation for someone so far outside their social circle. Elliot, his business partner, confronts him again, this time more forcefully. "Darwin, this is getting out of hand. You're putting everything at risk for what? A woman who's been on the streets?" But Darwin remains steadfast. He refuses to let public opinion dictate his actions. "I don't care what people think," he snaps. "Wendy's not what they're making her out to be." Still, as strong as his resolve is, Darwin knows he needs to talk to Wendy. He realizes she must have seen the article by now, and the thought of her facing this storm alone makes him sick. He cancels his meetings for the day and rushes to her apartment. When Darwin arrives at Wendy's apartment, he finds her sitting on the floor, the tabloid crumpled in her lap. Her eyes are red from crying, but when she sees him, her expression hardens. "I guess you've seen it then," Wendy says, her voice cold. She stands up, crossing her arms tightly across her chest. "Do you believe it? Do you think I'm after your money?" Darwin steps closer, his voice soft but firm. "No, I know you're not like that." Wendy turns away, her emotions swirling between anger and vulnerability. "You don't get it, Darwin. I've worked so hard just to survive, and now people are treating me like a joke, like I'm some kind of leech." Darwin's heart aches seeing her like this. "Wendy, you don't owe anyone an explanation. You're better than those headlines." But Wendy shakes her head, her voice breaking. "I thought I could rebuild my life, but how can I when everyone's already decided who I am? You don't know what it's like to have nothing. People like you can't understand." Darwin feels the weight of her words. She's right. He's never known the kind of struggle she's endured, and that creates a distance between them. He reaches for her hand, but she pulls away, retreating further into herself. "Maybe it's better if we just stop this," she says quietly, avoiding his gaze, "before things get worse." For a moment, Darwin is speechless. The idea of letting Wendy go stings more than he expected. "You can't mean that," he whispers, searching her face for any sign of doubt. But Wendy nods, though tears are brimming in her eyes. "I do." Without another word, Darwin leaves, feeling more lost than he has in years. For the first time, he wonders if their differences really are too big to overcome. The days after their fallout are torturous for both Wendy and Darwin. Wendy tries to move on, throwing herself into finding a job and proving to herself that she doesn't need Darwin's help. But with every rejection letter, her confidence crumbles a little more. She begins to doubt whether she'll ever escape the shadow of her past or the scandal that now follows her everywhere. Meanwhile, Darwin retreats into his work. He buries himself in projects for Hayes Industries, trying to drown out the pain of losing Wendy. But no matter how many deals he closes or meetings he attends, he can't stop thinking about her. Every time he sees her face in another article or hears someone gossiping about their scandalous affair, it feels like a knife in his chest. Elliot notices Darwin's growing detachment and tries once more to intervene. "Darwin, you've got to let her go. She's a distraction, nothing more." But Darwin shakes his head. "It's not that simple, Elliot. I care about her." Elliot scoffs. "Care about her? What? You're going to throw your whole life away for someone like her?" Darwin's silence is answer enough. He knows he can't just walk away from Wendy. She's become too important to him, more than he ever expected. But with the world against them and Wendy pushing him away, Darwin feels more powerless than ever. One evening, Darwin receives an unexpected call. It's Wendy, her voice trembling as she tells him she needs to see him. She doesn't give any details, only that it's urgent. Darwin rushes to meet her, his heart racing with anticipation and fear. When he arrives, he finds Wendy waiting in a small park near her apartment, looking fragile and unsure. "I'm sorry for pushing you away," she says, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was scared. Scared of what people would think, scared of needing you, scared of everything." Darwin steps closer, his heart swelling with relief. "You don't have to be scared anymore, Wendy. We can face this together." Wendy looks up at him, her eyes filled with tears, but also something else, hope. For the first time since their separation, she allows herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they can find a way through the storm. Their hands meet, and in that moment, the world around them fades away. They stand together, knowing that whatever challenges lie ahead, they're ready to face them side by side. Despite their reconciliation, the world around Darwin and Wendy continues to close in. News outlets, gossip blogs, and even business magazines can't seem to get enough of the fairy tale gone wrong between the billionaire and the homeless woman. Headlines like "Beauty and the Billionaire Beast" and "From the Streets to the Sheets," Darwin's new charity project, circulate everywhere. For Darwin, it's a nuisance. He's used to media attention, though not on this level. Yet for Wendy, it's a constant reminder of her vulnerability and the precariousness of their relationship. Despite her feelings for Darwin, she can't shake the fear that one misstep will send her life spiraling back to where it started. One night, after a long day of work, Darwin invites Wendy to dinner at his penthouse. They sit on the terrace, overlooking the sparkling skyline of Avalon City, but Wendy's unease is palpable. She barely touches her food, lost in thought. "You're quiet tonight," Darwin says softly, reaching for her hand. Wendy hesitates, staring out at the city. "I've been thinking, Darwin, about everything. About us." Darwin's chest tightens, sensing the weight behind her words. "What are you trying to say?" She turns to him, her eyes searching his. "I don't know if I fit in this world, your world. Everywhere we go, people are talking about us, judging us. I feel like I'm dragging you down." Darwin frowns, his grip on her hand tightening. "Wendy, none of that matters. I don't care what people think." "But I do," she blurts out, her voice shaking. "I care because every day I feel like I'm walking on eggshells, like at any moment, everything could fall apart. I can't live with that fear, Darwin." His heart sinks. He's always known there was a gap between their worlds, but he hadn't realized just how deeply it affected Wendy. He doesn't know how to reassure her, doesn't know what more he can do to show her that she belongs with him. Before he can respond, Wendy stands abruptly, stepping away from the table. "I need some time," she says, her voice barely above a whisper, "to figure out what I really want. I don't want to keep holding you back." Darwin rises to his feet, desperate to stop her. "Wendy, please, don't do this. We can work through this. Together." But Wendy shakes her head, tears brimming in her eyes. "I need to do this on my own." Without another word, she walks away, leaving Darwin standing alone on the terrace, the weight of her absence pressing down on him like a crushing wave. In the days that follow, Wendy and Darwin are separated again, this time by her choice. Wendy throws herself into job applications and interviews, desperate to regain her independence and prove, to herself and to the world, that she isn't just some charity case or a trophy for Darwin. She rents a small apartment on the outskirts of the city, away from the prying eyes of the media, and focuses on rebuilding her life. But no matter how hard she tries to move on, Darwin is always on her mind. The memories of their conversations, the warmth of his presence, the way he looked at her like she was the only person who mattered. It all haunts her, especially in the quiet moments when she's alone in her new, empty apartment. Meanwhile, Darwin is struggling as well. He buries himself in work, but it's clear to everyone around him that he's not the same. He's more distant, more irritable, and less patient. His business partner, Elliot, grows increasingly frustrated with Darwin's preoccupation. "You need to get a grip, Darwin," Elliot says during a meeting. "We've got a multi-million-dollar deal on the line, and you're acting like a lovesick teenager." Darwin clenches his jaw, his temper flaring. "This has nothing to do with the business, Elliot." Elliot shakes his head. "That's the problem. It should. This woman is a distraction. She's jeopardizing everything you've built. You need to make a choice, Darwin, her or the company." Darwin stands, his anger barely contained. "Get out, Elliot. You don't know anything about what I'm dealing with." Elliot leaves in a huff, but his words linger in Darwin's mind. For the first time, Darwin wonders if there's any truth to what his partner said. Is he really risking everything for Wendy? And if so, is it worth it? But even as the doubt gnaws at him, Darwin knows one thing for certain. He's not ready to let Wendy go. Not yet. Despite the lingering pain of their separation, Wendy starts to find her footing again. After weeks of searching, she finally lands a job as an administrative assistant at a small publishing company. It's not glamorous, but it's steady work, and it gives her a sense of purpose that she's been missing. Her boss, Mr. O'Donnell, is a gruff but kind-hearted man in his 50s who takes a liking to Wendy almost immediately. He gives her a chance despite the gaps in her resume and her unconventional background. Wendy quickly proves herself, working long hours and taking on more responsibilities than her job description requires. For the first time in years, she feels like she's truly in control of her life. But even as Wendy throws herself into her new job, the media's scrutiny doesn't let up. Paparazzi still follow her, snapping photos of her, coming and going from her modest apartment, speculating about her relationship with Darwin. One afternoon, as Wendy is leaving work, she's ambushed by a reporter. Wendy, how does it feel to go from homeless to dating one of the richest men in Avalon City? Are you still in contact with Darwin Hayes?" Wendy freezes, her heart racing. She tries to push past the reporter, but he steps in front of her, shoving a microphone in her face. "Do you have any comment on the rumors that Darwin Hayes is engaged to another woman? Is that why you two broke up?" Wendy stops in her tracks, her stomach lurching. "What did you say?" she asks, her voice barely a whisper. The reporter smirks. "You haven't heard? Darwin Hayes is rumored to be engaged to socialite Lydia Harrington. Looks like you were just a passing fling after all." Wendy's world tilts on its axis. She hadn't spoken to Darwin in weeks, hadn't checked the news or followed the gossip, but hearing this now, so casually, so cruelly, feels like a punch to the gut. Without another word, she turns and walks away, the reporter's questions still echoing in her ears. Darwin hears about the rumors before Wendy does, but by the time he finds out, the story has already taken on a life of its own. Gossip columns and tabloids are full of articles claiming that he's rekindling his relationship with Lydia Harrington, an old flame from his social circle. The truth is far from the headlines. Darwin hasn't spoken to Lydia in months, but the media doesn't care about the facts. Elliot, of course, is thrilled. "This is exactly what you need," he tells Darwin over drinks one night. "People want to see you with someone like Lydia. She's perfect for your image, for the company." Darwin glares at him. "I don't care about my image, and I'm not interested in Lydia." Elliot shrugs. "Maybe not, but the public is. Look, Darwin, this is your chance to put all that Wendy business behind you. People will forget about her eventually. You just need to move on." But Darwin can't move on. No matter how hard he tries, he can't stop thinking about Wendy, about how things ended between them, about the pain in her eyes when she walked away. He knows he made mistakes, knows that he let the world's judgment come between them, but he's not ready to let her slip away for good. One night, after another long day at work, Darwin decides he's had enough. He can't live like this anymore, pretending that he's fine, pretending that Wendy doesn't matter. He picks up his phone and dials her number, his heart pounding in his chest as it rings. After a few agonizing moments, Wendy answers, her voice soft and hesitant. "Darwin?" Darwin takes a deep breath, the words tumbling out before he can stop them. "Wendy, I need to see you. Please. I know I messed up, but I can't stop thinking about you. I can't do this without you." There's a long pause on the other end of the line, and Darwin's heart sinks. He's sure she's going to say no, sure. She's moved on and wants nothing to do with him. But then, finally, when he speaks. "Okay," she says quietly, "let's talk." And just like that, Darwin knows that their story isn't over yet. Wendy sat at a small coffee shop in Avalon City, her heart pounding as she waited for Darwin to arrive. It had been weeks since they had last spoken, and the distance had both hurt her and allowed her to grow. She no longer felt entirely dependent on Darwin or his world, but his call had shaken her. She wasn't sure if she was ready to face him again, or what they would even say to each other. When Darwin finally walked in, looking as handsome and commanding as ever, Wendy felt her breath catch. His presence still had a magnetic pull, no matter how much she tried to distance herself. As he sat down across from her, they exchanged an awkward but warm greeting. For the first few minutes, they exchanged small talk, catching up on each other's lives. Wendy's new job, Darwin's latest business ventures. But the tension between them was thick, unspoken emotions hanging in the air. Finally, Darwin broke the silence. "Wendy, I've missed you every day since you walked away," he said, his voice raw with emotion. "I know I hurt you, and I let other people's opinions get in the way of what we had, but I've been miserable without you." Wendy's heart ached at his words, but she wasn't ready to give in so easily. "Darwin, I don't know if this can work. The world we live in, it's too different. I don't fit into your life. I never have." Darwin leaned forward, his eyes intense. "That's where you're wrong. You do fit, Wendy. You belong with me. It's not about where you came from or what people think. It's about us. About what we feel for each other." Wendy shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "But your world is ruthless. People are cruel, Darwin. They'll always see me as that homeless girl you took pity on. I don't want to live under that shadow forever." Darwin's jaw tightened. He hated how much pain the media had caused her, how it had warped her perception of their relationship. "Then we'll fight back," he said firmly. "We'll show them that none of that matters. Wendy, I don't care about their opinions. I only care about you. I love you." The words hung in the air between them, and Wendy's breath hitched at his confession. She had always known, deep down, that Darwin cared for her, but hearing him say the words so openly made her walls crumble. "I love you too, Darwin," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "But I'm scared. I'm scared that no matter what we do, we'll never escape the judgment." Darwin reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "Then let's stop caring what the world thinks. Let's just focus on us. We'll figure it out together." For the first time in weeks, Wendy felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could make this work. Over the next few weeks, Darwin and Wendy took things slowly, rebuilding the trust and connection they had once shared. Darwin made a conscious effort to shield Wendy from the spotlight, keeping their relationship as private as possible. He no longer entertained interviews or public appearances that would invite scrutiny into their lives. Wendy, on the other hand, continued to focus on her job at the publishing company. She had made a name for herself as a diligent and hardworking employee, and Mr. O'Donnell increasingly relied on her for more important tasks. For the first time in a long time, Wendy felt like she was in control of her own destiny. She was no longer the homeless woman clinging to Darwin's success. She was becoming her own person. One evening, Darwin surprised Wendy at her apartment after work. He had prepared a quiet, intimate dinner for the two of them, wanting to show her that their love didn't need to be defined by luxury or grand gestures. As they ate together, Wendy found herself feeling more at ease than she had in months. "This is nice," she said, smiling softly. "No cameras, no reporters, just us." Darwin reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "This is how it should always be, Wendy. I want to build a life with you that's free from all the noise." Wendy hesitated, her thoughts drifting back to the cruel words of the media and the pressure that still weighed on her shoulders. But what if the noise never stops? What if they never let us be? Darwin's expression softened, and he stood, walking around the table to kneel in front of her. "Then we'll drown it out with our love. We'll prove to the world that nothing can come between us." Wendy looked down at him, tears brimming in her eyes. She realized in that moment that Darwin was willing to fight for her, for them, in a way that no one ever had before. And that gave her the strength to fight too. Just when Wendy and Darwin thought they were finding their footing, a new challenge emerged, one that neither of them had anticipated. Darwin's business partner, Elliot, had grown increasingly resentful of Wendy's influence on Darwin's life. He believed that she was a distraction, a liability, and that Darwin's focus on her was jeopardizing their company's future. Elliot had been quietly scheming behind Darwin's back, and one day, he dropped a bombshell at a board meeting. "We've been reviewing the company's performance over the past few months, and it's clear that we're losing ground. Our investors are getting nervous, Darwin." Darwin frowned, glancing at the numbers on the presentation slide. "That's not accurate, Elliot. We're still seeing steady growth." Elliot shook his head, feigning concern. "Not at the rate we should be, and our reputation is suffering. The media circus surrounding your personal life, it's making investors skittish. Some have even mentioned pulling out unless we clean things up." Darwin's jaw tightened. He knew where this was going. "What are you suggesting?" Elliot leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I'm suggesting that you distance yourself from Wendy, at least publicly. She's dragging us down, Darwin, and if you don't make a move soon, we could lose everything." The room fell silent, all eyes on Darwin as he processed Elliot's words. Part of him wanted to lash out, to tell Elliot to mind his own business. But another part of him, the part that had spent years building his empire, knew that there was some truth in what Elliot was saying. But as he sat there, thinking about the life he wanted, Darwin realized that his company wasn't the only thing he had built. He had built something far more valuable with Wendy, something worth fighting for. And he wasn't about to throw it away because of a few nervous investors. "I'm not going to abandon the woman I love," Darwin said firmly, his voice cutting through the tension in the room. "If our investors can't see the value in that, then maybe they're not the right partners for us." Elliot stared at him, his face reddening with frustration. "Darwin, this is a business decision." "No," Darwin interrupted, his voice cold. "This is my life, and I'm not going to let anyone dictate who I should be with." The boardroom fell silent again, but this time, there was a sense of finality in the air. Darwin had made his choice. As word of Darwin's stance spread, the media frenzy intensified. Reporters doubled down on their efforts to dig into Wendy's past, painting her as a gold digger and questioning her intentions. It was relentless, and even though Darwin tried to shield her from it, the weight of the public scrutiny began to take its toll on Wendy. One evening, as they sat together in Darwin's penthouse, Wendy couldn't hold back her frustration any longer. "I can't do this, Darwin. I can't keep living under a microscope, having my every move dissected by strangers who don't even know me." Darwin sighed, pulling her into his arms. "I know it's hard, Wendy, but we can't let them win. We can't let them destroy what we've built." Wendy shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "But what if I'm not strong enough? What if I can't handle it?" Darwin's heart ached at her words, but he refused to let her go. "You're stronger than you think, Wendy, and I'm not going to let you face this alone. We'll get through this together. I promise." For the first time in weeks, Wendy allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could weather the storm. But deep down, she knew that the hardest part was yet to come. Wendy and Darwin thought they had faced the worst of the storm, But as they soon discovered, it was far from over. One afternoon, Darwin received a call from his assistant that shook him to his core. Elliot, his former business partner, had leaked confidential company information to the press, claiming that Darwin's personal life was affecting his ability to run the company. Headlines splashed across every news outlet, accusing Darwin of mismanagement and claiming that Wendy was the root cause of the company's supposed downfall. The media frenzy exploded overnight, and investors, once loyal, began to panic. The stock value of Darwin's company, Westbridge International, plummeted, and some of the board members started to question Darwin's leadership. Elliot's betrayal was a knife in Darwin's back, but worse than that was how the media vilified Wendy. She was painted as a manipulative gold digger, a woman who had entrapped a billionaire and driven him to ruin. When Darwin returned home that night, Wendy could see the exhaustion in his eyes. "It's worse, isn't it?" she asked, her voice trembling. Darwin nodded, running a hand through his hair. "Elliot's betrayal. It's bad, Wendy. The board is demanding that I step down until this blows over. They think I'm a liability." Wendy's heart sank. She had never wanted to be the cause of so much trouble for him. "Darwin, maybe it's time I left. For good. I'm only making things worse for you." Darwin stared at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of disbelief and pain. "Wendy, no, don't even think that. I don't care what the board or the media says. You're not the problem. This is Elliot's doing, not yours." "But I can't stand the thought of being the reason you lose everything," Wendy whispered, her voice breaking. Darwin stepped forward, cupping her face in his hands. "Listen to me. I love you, Wendy. I don't care about the money or the company if it means losing you. We'll get through this together. I'll rebuild everything if I have to, but I won't lose you. Not again." Tears welled up in Wendy's eyes, and she realized that Darwin truly meant every word. He was willing to risk everything for her, for their love. But the question was, would it be enough? The next few days were some of the most difficult Darwin and Wendy had ever faced. With Elliot continuing to feed lies to the press, the negative attention surrounding Wendy reached a fever pitch. Paparazzi camped outside their apartment, tabloids printed scathing articles, and even social media was filled with cruel comments. But through it all, Darwin stood by Wendy's side, refusing to let the media drive a wedge between them. Darwin's next move was crucial. He called for a press conference, one that would hopefully clear both his and Wendy's names. Wendy was terrified at the idea of standing in front of the world, but Darwin assured her that they would face it together. When the day of the press conference arrived, the room was packed with reporters, cameras flashing and questions being shouted as soon as Darwin and Wendy took the stage. Darwin held Wendy's hand tightly, refusing to let go even for a second. Darwin began the conference by addressing the accusations head-on. "I know there have been rumors about my leadership, my company, and, more importantly, about the woman I love. I'm here today to set the record straight." The room quieted as Darwin continued. "First and foremost, Wendy is not responsible for any of the challenges my company has faced. Those are business matters that will be dealt with internally, and the actions of certain individuals, like Elliot, are being investigated. But what I will not tolerate is the continued harassment of Wendy by the media and the public." Darwin paused, his gaze sweeping the room. "Wendy is a kind, hard-working woman who has been unfairly dragged into this because of her relationship with me. She has done nothing wrong, and I won't allow anyone to tear her down for being the woman I love. We're in this together, and I will protect her, no matter the cost." Wendy's heart swelled with emotion as she listened to Darwin defend her in front of the world. For the first time, she felt like they were truly a united front, ready to face whatever came their way. After the conference, the tide began to turn. Public opinion slowly shifted in their favor as more people began to see the truth behind Elliot's betrayal. Darwin's company began stabilizing, and the board, recognizing Darwin's loyalty and integrity, decided to stand by him rather than push for his removal. Months passed, and slowly, life began to return to normal for Darwin and Wendy. The media frenzy had died down, and while there were still some who gossiped about their relationship, they no longer cared. They had survived the storm and come out stronger for it. One evening, as they sat on the rooftop of Darwin's apartment building, watching the sunset, Darwin turned to Wendy, his expression serious but filled with love. "I've been thinking a lot about everything we've been through," Darwin began, taking her hand in his, "and I've realized that I don't want to wait any longer. I don't want to waste another second without making you officially a part of my life." Wendy's breath caught as Darwin reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Her heart raced as he opened it, revealing a stunning diamond ring. "Wendy, will you marry me?" Tears filled Wendy's eyes as she looked at Darwin, the man who had loved her through every trial and challenge they had faced. She had never imagined this moment would come, not when she had been living on the streets, not when the world had turned against her, but here she was, with the man who had stood by her through it all. "Yes," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, I'll marry you." Darwin slipped the ring onto her finger, and they kissed under the golden light of the setting sun, sealing their future together. 7 years had passed since Wendy had first met Darwin, and as she looked around their home, a beautiful villa by the sea, she couldn't believe how far they had come. Their lives were filled with love, laughter, and success, but what mattered most was that they had each other. Wendy had built her own career in publishing, rising through the ranks to become an editor-in-chief of one of the most prestigious publishing houses in Avalon City. Darwin's company had flourished, recovering from the setbacks of the past, and had expanded into new markets around the world. They had a daughter now, a bright-eyed little girl named Ella, who had inherited her father's determination and her mother's kindness. Wendy and Darwin doted on her, raising her in a home filled with love and stability, something Wendy had never thought she would have when she was living on the streets. One evening, as they sat together on the porch of their villa, watching Ella play in the garden, Darwin turned to Wendy with a smile. "Remember when everyone laughed at us?" he said, his voice filled with amusement. Wendy laughed, leaning her head on his shoulder. "They didn't think we'd make it." Darwin kissed her forehead softly. "But we did, and I wouldn't trade a single moment of it." Wendy looked up at him, her heart filled with gratitude for the life they had built together. "Neither would I." They watched the sunset together, hand in hand, knowing that no matter what challenges the future might bring, they would always face them together. The homeless girl who had once been laughed at for daring to love a billionaire had become the center of a family, a partnership, and a life filled with love that no one could ever take away. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the story. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more delightful stories.